Ooh, they're here.
Hi. Sorry it took us so long
Hello.
to get here.
You have kids. You
Yeah,
have kids. You are excused.
thank you.
Hello.
Hello, Mandy. We have never spoken before.
Nice
How are you?
to meet you. I'm good. The kids are in bed. I'm good.
Well, I mean, it's hard having kids.
It's good and hard, right? Like
Yeah.
anything worth
Well,
in life.
right. I mean, I love kids. I babysit other people's kids. Like when they ask me to babysit, I tell them I'm not going to pay you for the privilege. And I mean it. Because I absolutely love kids, and I've taken care of a lot of people's kids at various times. But yeah, I don't have kids myself. But we're here to discuss the two of you. Um, so uh, Michael's been on a few times. Tell tell us about yourselves and what you would like to share as much as you would like to share. Who are you, Mandy Sartori?
um, this
She's
is
a
very
she's a real
existential.
she's a real professional. Like, I mean, she has a title or something.
Is it
I'm
Dr. Mandy Sartori?
no,
No,
thank
no.
God, no, not qualified even remotely. I do a lot of different things. I have a lot of different hats. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I would say first, obviously, I'm a mom, and so that kind of colors everything. It has taken a new identity that I did not expect it to be. And then what I get paid to do is I'm a children's director at a church.
Oh, nice.
And then
May,
I am a
may I
DJ.
ask which denomination of church,
You
which
absolutely
flavor?
can. It is a non denominational church. So
So
all
it's
the flavors.
Baptist.
No, you'd think so, but no, I don't think that we would align.
Well, probably basic. I mean, I don't know.
Every time I hear non-denominational, it ends up being Baptist.
It's definitely not. They're way more liberal than I have come across some of my
Okay.
Baptist friends and their uh, theology.
Okay. Okay. Um, but Michael tells me you come from a Jewish background.
I do. I do.
So tell me about that.
Um,
Were you raised Jewish?
I was raised in kind of a smorgasbord home.
Okay.
My mom's so I'm Jewish by heritage from my mother's side,
Okay.
and Seidel is our name that has been passed through,
Okay.
and um, we are Russian Jews,
Okay.
and then they ended up in Canada and then migrated down.
Mhm.
And I've still got some family members in Israel,
Okay.
and it's kind of an interesting mix because my grandmother rocked the boat because she fell in love with a Greek man who was not Jewish.
Aha.
Because of that, she and her husband, obviously my grandfather, excuse me, decided that they were going to raise their kids um, however they wanted to be raised. And so they
Okay.
celebrated Jewish holidays and holy days, but I'm so sorry. I'm parched. This is my
You are such a mother. Well, from a sippy cup.
anyway, I'm getting distracted because I'm used to the camera being on the other side. I
I'm gonna
apologize.
put the thing
And
down.
I'm looking in the wrong
Hold
direction.
on, just
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm so sorry we were late too.
No, it's perfectly fine. It's like this was part of what I was talking about before you came on was people like me who don't have a wife and children get to be on the internet constantly and do things like this, and I think that actually negatively affects the conversation, and that's why I've started doing this series. You're the third, and tomorrow Chris and his wife are actually going to be on. Um, Chris Picow, and because I think that negatively affects the conversation because we're weeding out the people who have real lives that are busy with kids and they're not as involved as the crazy single people with cats, you know? Um, and I think it negatively affects the conversation. So part of what I wanted to do is involve parents. And so, do you guys remember when somebody complained? I think it was a Catholic priest, it might have been a Protestant pastor, complained on Twitter about the kids being loud in church, and like the entire internet came down on him like a ton of bricks. I was really happy about that because one of the things I really, really dislike, especially this tends to happen in Reform and conservative synagogues, not in Orthodox ones, is yeah, if your kids are too young, you shouldn't bring them to synagogue. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. you know?
I
Um,
actually fundamentally get bothered by that.
mm,
And it's something that we have tried to adjust or look at. Specifically with my position, I mean, I never thought that I'd be a children's director. It wasn't something that I grew up wanting to do. It's kind of something that I fell into, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, but
mm,
I really care about adults. And so I kind of look at it as I'm working towards the parents to help them be good um,
mm,
pastors of their home.
mm,
And it's really hard to teach a kid that they're part of a body or a congregation if you are constantly saying you're not welcome here.
yeah.
And so we started shifting like our grade levels that are coming into the larger body meeting so that they can feel like, okay, I belong here. This matters. I matter to this. Because
Hmm.
why would any kid, you've got to start somewhere.
Right. Yeah. 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 It's incredibly important that I think part of the problem, one of the things I keep on saying is our society has become a lot of atomized individuals, and we're not atomized individuals. We're people who human beings need human beings in order to function. And the most basic unit is not just the nuclear family. Actually, I think it's really important to also include grandparents and cousins and things like that. But at the very least, like dealing with people on a couple basis. Like if I were inviting Michael to anything in real life, of course I would invite his wife. But this idea that like, oh, I'm inviting him on my channel and I'm inviting his wife, I think that's kind of novel to people, and it shouldn't be, because of course, like it's part of who Michael is that he's married to you, and it's probably the most important thing in his life, right, Michael?
Yep.
I totally look like I'm taller than you too
Yeah.
because of the way that they see.
Are you taller than him?
I most definitely not taller than him. I, on a good day, barely reach 5 feet.
Oh wow, okay. So you are a Jewish woman. So what do you think of his channel? Do you get to listen to it? What do you think of Bridges of Meaning? Our little corner of the internet, all this weird Jordan Peterson stuff. What does all this mean to you?
I think Mike was like a ship waiting for a port for a long
Hmm.
time. And he had all
Hmm.
these ideas swirling around in his head. And for a while, our life was such that I was so exhausted. I look like I'm so emotional right now. This is allergies. Um, and for a while, I think all of these ideas were brimming around. And because we wouldn't get a chance to discuss it, we were both
Hmm.
just like done, me with the kids all day or him with work all day. And then he's got all these ideas. He's got no one to talk with. And I
Hmm.
think he felt like he was this rudderless ship. I don't know if this is accurate. And so I feel extremely grateful that he has an avenue to be able to communicate all of these thoughts that are ruminating around, and for him to be able to discuss and dialogue with people who challenge him and encourage him and make him feel like he's not alone, that he's got a port that he can dock in. I love that. And my husband is so freaking smart. And so it's
Yeah.
really exciting to me. And he's also the most shy individual I have ever met.
Really?
So shy, so shy. When we got married,
Mm-hmm.
he wrote a song for me, and he
Aw.
performed it
Aw.
at our reception, and
That's
people
on
were
YouTube now.
shocked.
That's on my channel.
Oh, it is?
I put the little we didn't
We didn't get a
we were
videographer.
dumb
We were
and
broke.
we didn't have somebody videotape it, but we have a few like clips from cell phone video that some people gave us. So I just put that on like a week ago or so, a little short clip of a couple songs that we did from that. So but yeah.
So people were shocked that he had
nobody knew that I could do things.
that he could sing, I mean, people knew he was a musician, but I had several friends communicate to me that they were blown away by the fact that he was able to like get outside of himself. And so those friends who we don't get to see now that we live in Texas have started listening to his channel, and that's really exciting to me because they'll communicate with me some ideas that they have been learning. And I love that he feels comfortable and safe to be able to express himself in the way that God has ordained for him to communicate.
Yeah, well, so this was my idea, is that she meets like a million women all the time. Like when we moved here, she signed up for Bible studies at like 4 churches like right away
because they had childcare.
And then she'd make friends or whatever, and then she'd always like, her and her friends would always be like, oh, I hope our husbands will get along or whatever. And then I would always meet these guys, and they were so boring, and I did not care about anything that interests them. I don't like golf. I don't like football that much. I don't like whatever, I don't know, whatever people that work for like oil companies do for work and fun. So I figured I'll make this YouTube channel, and that way, if you really want any of these guys to like be friends with me, like have them watch this, and then if they like it, then we'll have something to talk about. Like, because I do like, but I am introverted, but but I do have things I want to get out, so that's why I make the videos. But I like to cut to the chase with people. Like, I don't want to wade through all this small talk if they don't actually have anything interesting that I want, in common with somebody. So that was kind of my idea. It hasn't really worked yet, but
Well, you made friends with me. That's what's most important, really.
yeah.
So, I had a little chat stream before you guys came on, and one of the things I was talking with Noah, who's somebody he actually lives in Los Angeles, but I've still never met him. But we we interact on the internet, which is the weirdest thing. But he so he's Protestant as well. No Jewish background, but he's been going to synagogues. And I mentioned to him what Michael said. Oh, this is Noah. He says hi. So I mentioned to him what you told me about your feelings about integrating Jewish ritual into Protestant practice instead of what a lot of people in our corner of the internet have been doing, which is becoming Catholic, or like Job, who's the Protestant who he prays the rosary every day, and like people are becoming Eastern Orthodox. So I wanted to, first of all, to hear your thinking about that, and what that's been like, and yeah, just tell us what you think and stuff.
What? You want my opinion or her opinion? I feel like
Yes.
I've talked to you about that a lot, but
Well, there are people watching who are not me. Believe it or not,
okay.
one or two people do. Apparently, there are 3 people watching at least this channel right now. So,
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
So something that I never finished the background part of it, but when my grandparents decided that it had been a tension point and they were going to raise their kids, however, all 4 of those kids ended up at a congregational Protestant church, and they became professing Protestant Christians.
mhm.
And I think my grandmother was like, I don't care. which leads me to believe that her Judaism was very situational and
Yeah.
not very intrinsically a part of the why, I guess.
Right.
Anyway, so when I started getting a little bit older, I was probably like 7, and I started getting fascinated about my genealogy and all of that stuff. I was really young and did a deep dive into the Holocaust, because that's usually where it starts for most people, and was obsessed with Anne Frank. And we started then, my parents, meeting with my aunt and celebrating holidays with her, because we hadn't been doing that. And so we did that growing up for a good long time. And I was fascinated by the rhythm and the orthodoxy of it, because the churches I grew up in didn't really have any orthodoxy. And
Mhm.
and I feel like it's innate in us that we want rhythm, and we want tradition, to steal a line from Fiddler on the Roof. And I think that is comfortable and safe. And something just speaks so loudly to me about the orthodoxy of the Jewish faith. And I do think that it is something that is largely missing in Protestant churches, that we are kind of like drifting and looking for the next big thing to get people into the doors, instead of saying, this is who we are and this is what we stand for. Please join us.
Mhm.
And so I read a book in college called Mudhouse Sabbath. And I
Okay.
think the author's name is Lauren Winner. And she was an Orthodox, I believe, or maybe she was Reformed. And she became a Protestant.
So it says, yeah, conversion from Orthodox Judaism to Christianity. I have to tell you, I am very, very skeptical of people who claim to be Orthodox Jews and
Mm-hmm.
convert to Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
because every time I've checked it out, it's almost never true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So she wrote
And there's a lot
a
of people who like this stuff. Yeah.
what interested me about her story was that she wrote Mudhouse Sabbath as she was transitioning, and and she used a lot of the orthodoxy of what she had been brought up with to point back to the truth of Scripture, and instead of it being like tied to what she grew up in youth group, or tied to what her parents told her, it was tied to like historical liturgy and things like that. And so that is a long roundabout answer to say that I really do think that our churches miss that. It's something that I was always drawn to. It's something that like Lauren Winner just so beautifully pointed and kind of did an exposition into. This is what this actually means, and this is how the Protestants are missing the mark, and this is how we can incorporate this into worship, because it matters, because we're all children of God, and no matter what sect we are.
So,
That's a very long-winded answer.
I actually just looked up her her Wikipedia thing.
Yeah.
Winter was born to a Jewish father and a Southern Baptist mother, and was raised Jewish. She converted to Orthodox Judaism in her freshman year at Columbia, and then to Christianity while doing her master's degree. And so I had this discussion a little bit with Michael. So according to Orthodox Judaism, you and your children are just Jewish. So um, I, it's kind of weird. I was just talking to my rabbi about somebody I know who is not halakhically Jewish, but he puts on tefillin every day. He's very active in Judaism. And obviously, as not being halakhically Jewish, it's like we would actually, I mean, people who are believing Orthodox Jews, and I would like to think of myself as that, even though obviously I don't observe. Um, like we believe that it's actually spiritually damaging to him as somebody who's not Jewish to be taking on these Jewish things. Whereas, the opposite would be uh, true of you and your children. Like I told Michael, if you were to call up the local Chabad, which is the Hasidic synagogue, they would gladly invite your whole family for Shabbat dinner and to synagogue services, and you know um, and that does come from a belief that Judaism isn't an ethnicity, that there's spiritual realities to it, which Reform and Conservative just don't have. You know what I mean? They don't actually believe there are spiritual realities to Jewish law, which obviously I do, right? So yeah, so that's just my thinking about it, and that's why I was, when Michael was interested in Passover, or I suggested, Shabbat candles. The Rebbe, who was the leader of the Hasidic group Chabad, which I'm involved with, he was really, really big on Jewish women lighting Shabbat candles, and he just he really thought it's a very strong thing that, and some people have said that they feel it has spiritually really connected with them. Um, but again, like, being respectful of you and your beliefs, right? It's like, well, you have your beliefs, just like this boy who I don't believe is Jewish. He thinks of himself as very Jewish, and that's the lifestyle he lives. And he's like, what do you mean? I put on tefillin every day, and the vast majority of Jews don't. And it's a weird position to be in, because I do want to be respectful of his identity and his beliefs. At the same time, for me, it's like I believe it's a spiritual reality. And some of the people who are involved in our community, my Discord server, Michael's a little involved in that. What they've gotten very offended when I've said, it's, our belief is that a Gentile keeping the Sabbath the way Jews do is spiritually damaging. And I wouldn't say that to him. Like, there was one particular person who it did damage our relationship when I said that, and the easiest thing for me would be to say to him, oh, you go right ahead, you do whatever you want. But it's just very difficult navigating that place. And at the same time, like, I would like to, I'm sure Michael would be a lot happier if I did believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and that Paul was his apostle. And I respect that, and that's why I was happy when Michael. I don't know if you listened to Michael's episode of Spotify of Post Platonic or not.
I think I shared that one with you. But
Okay.
No, I haven't gotten to listen to that yet.
Okay. So I started this thing that it's the idea is to get lots and lots of people to host this. It's kind of like a radio show. It's music, quotes, and it's a lot like a radio show. It has you can use any music you want from Spotify. That's part of what I like about it. And Michael did a tribute to Paul, who may be Paul of Tarsus, who I jokingly and somewhat not jokingly refer to as Baal of Tarsus. Not precisely my favorite theological figure in the world. And he dedicated it to Paul, which was beautiful because it's honest. And that's the type of honesty I want from my friends, and what I think we have in this corner of the internet. And that was me talking a lot and not letting you guys speak. So what do you think about all of this that I said?
Well, I think, I understand like the, let's see, let me put this. I think we know like that there's damage has been done in the example of like science, where everything is trying to always like reduce everything down, and like you have a whole person. Oh, but then if you cut a person up, oh well, they're just made out of blood and tissues, and you just cut up blood and tissues, and it's just made out of cells, and these cells are just made out of little bits of stuff, and you just keep trying to like the more you try to like reduce it to find like what is the essential thing, you lose that. You can't find it by like deconstructing, I guess you could say. And I think that we've done that to a certain point with the liturgical and ritual aspects of worship, which is why so many people are going full speed to I'm going to go Orthodox or Roman Catholic or Orthodox Judaism or whatever, because it's then you're going back to a system that has the whole package. But here in Protestant land, I'm saying, okay, we've probably gone as far as we can with the deconstruction. I think the deconstruction stops at the Bible. Once you start not using the Bible or cutting up certain sections of it or whatever, which you could even argue about which parts of the Bible are the Bible. But when you have church that doesn't even have the Bible, then it's not church. It's not anything. It's just like postmodernism with a fancy building. So there is a limit to how far you can deconstruct. And for me, like I personally believe that if you have the Bible and you take the things that it says, on its face value, which is to say that God created this world and everything in it, and His works are, present in everything, then you could derive an incredible amount of meaning from just everything in your normal life. But for a lot of people, that's really difficult. And so I think that's where having the ritual and the rhythm and these sort of sacred practices is really helpful. And so, it is good to bring some of those things back. But, it's interesting because I've heard the same thing that you were saying about it being spiritually damaging. Like Jonathan Pajot said that about like people fasting or doing the Jesus prayer too much if they're not like catechumenized into the
that's what
Eastern Orthodox Church.
That's what we believe when people take communion, when they're not fully aware of what they're doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Even where churches will say, because like we even had communion in our church today, and pastor said like, the verse where it talks about not doing it in an unworthy manner, and there's a lot of interpretation that's needed in that too, even. And I've heard good arguments that of people saying, because I think a lot of Protestant churches will say, don't let your kids have communion until they've made their own decision for to be a Christian, and that this is their faith and they understand it, which I guess is fine. But I've also heard some good people saying, well, you're raising your kids in a faith, and this is part of the practice of their faith. So you don't have to wait. If you as a parent think that that's an instructive part of their learning, to that's at the parent's discretion. So I think there's always there's always a little bit of debate about how rigidly these things must be kept. But I think the problem, where I see it as a Protestant, why I'm not deciding to become a Catholic, is because I think that they've made it too rigid in the practice. Like, and if it's not the version of whatever officially sanctioned by the Catholic Church, it doesn't count, and it it's bad for you, or it's not good for you, or whatever. And I don't think that's really how God works on those things. For those who are earnestly trying to seek Him, if somebody's earnestly trying to seek God, and they do something that a priest would say is technically out of bounds for them based on their level of education or their experience, I don't think that they're going to get struck by lightning. I mean, and I do think that it could be I do think there is danger in things, like I would say from our background, we've been involved in a lot of like Pentecostal charismatic churches, and there's definitely people that are going to those kind of like seeking a thrill or something like that. And I think that could be spiritually damaging if you're trying to open yourself up to spiritual experiences and you're not knowledgeable enough of the Bible and the character of God to discern. Then a spiritual feeling will seem like a much greater authority than some boring pastor just telling you to love your neighbor or something like that. But one of them is clearly something that God wants for you, and the other one might be something that comes from another spirit. So so there is definitely danger in not using wisdom in your spiritual journey, I would say. But yeah, that was me talking a lot there. So somebody else can have a chance.
I want to hear what Mandie thinks.
I mean, I feel like I already espoused what I think.
Okay. Did you guys baptize your children already, or are you gonna wait until?
No,
Okay.
in our church, we do baby dedications where the parents say we are going to endeavor to do everything we can together with this congregation to raise our children up in the way that we believe that they should go. And so we dedicate them to the Lord. So Joe and Lucy have been dedicated, but then we believe that it's the person's choice to be baptized. So when the kids are ready, if they're ready, then they'll decide when they get baptized.
So, what do you think of the Passover? How did it go? Was it your first time, or was it?
No, it was not my first time. I've done it many, 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 many times.
Okay.
My children are too young to sit still. I mean, it was their first time. So granted, and poor Mike was just trying to lead us well. And I knew that particular day the girls were just done. So we didn't even get to do it. Yeah, one of them was sick. We pulled the plug on actual Passover night.
We were supposed to do it with my parents and my brother and his family. And then one of our girls was sick. So I went over to my parents' house and did it with my parents and my brother's family. And then the next night we did it together, just the four of us. But it was
because I work with kids so much, like I understand, okay, this is probably their attention span for this particular age group.
It was a very
and Mike was leading it, and so
rushed
he really
version.
wanted the letter of it to be communicated. And I was realizing these children are not prepared for this. They cannot sit. So I think if he and I had just done it together, it would have been a more enjoyable experience. But I'm glad we did it, and I think that it set the groundwork for future years. I think next year our kids will be in a much better place to go, okay, and here's where we sit, and here's where we take the bitter herbs, and here's where we just the rhythm of it better. But again, it goes back to the beginning of our conversation. You have to start somewhere, and you just teach them and their kids.
Right. No, and actually the Passover Seder, I mean, even from an ultra Orthodox point of view, it's because it is so focused on the children. You know, you do what is necessary to get the children as much participating as they can, and if you need to move on from certain things because they're tired or whatever, that's actually probably the place where we are most flexible in terms of ritual, is actually at the Seder. And like I told Mike, if you guys are 100% welcome at your local Chabad, like they will love to have you, because as far as we're concerned, you're Jewish, and your kids are Jewish.
He's not, though. I always wanted to marry a Jewish man. That did not happen.
You know what?
And
At this point, you have kids together, and while they're not going to call him up to the Torah, he is 100% welcome at every event, and because once you have kids, he's the father of Jewish kids, and they're going to want you as involved as anybody. Like, I wish a lot of the people who are involved in our so for example, Antonio, who he's not Jewish, but he believes Judaism is true. He really does believe Judaism is true. And he's not looking to convert to Judaism, and Judaism doesn't say that he needs to. And like he's planning on getting married, and getting a rabbi who's willing to even talk to him has been impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're like, we don't proselytize. We don't, and I've had other people who, were raised Jewish. Somebody else from our server, who everybody should know who I'm talking about, he was raised Jewish. That's the only religion he's ever known. He wants to raise his kid Jewish, but his mother wasn't Jewish. The kid's mother is not Jewish. So, like, he's tried going to Chabad, and the rabbi's like, was very nice to him, as he would be to somebody who's not really welcome, but was like, we're not here for you, and they're not. And so I'm in this weird position, and Noah says Judaism wasn't always so closed and hereditary. There's a reaction post. I'm not sure I agree with that. I do think, we've had this issue for thousands of years, and yes, Christianity certainly complicated it. But like, I would love for some of the people who are involved in our community to be as welcome as Michael would be. But because he's the father of Jewish children. And
so I've always wondered how to prove that, because so I went on a birthright trip.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just fascinated by them, like, checking my lineage and deciding that I was worthy enough, that I had qualified enough, because they first turned down my brother the first time. And I would say
if your mother's mother has a ketubah, was married or Orthodox, and if you have that ketubah and your lineage from her, you are 100% Jewish. You are
Right,
as
but
Jewish as
they actually wouldn't let him go on the birthright trip the first time that he applied. And I got to
any.
go like the year before. And
Did
so
they
he was
know?
so confused. And he thankfully he reapplied and they said, okay, we're gonna let you go. But I've always
Do you
wondered
have
about that.
Do you have a ketubah from your
No.
grandmother?
Mm-mm.
You don't have a ketubah. Um,
But my
if you
my
have
mother's
the
mother's mother's
genealogy,
mother's
well, the question becomes like, okay, where can they prove that whoever it is? I mean, yeah, they can look at the genealogy, but what's used is an actual ketubah of, for me, for example, my parents were married by an Orthodox rabbi. I have the ketubah, and so as their children, I'm Jewish. um and so yeah, that's how it is proved. So if you can find a ketubah, or even, I mean, a marriage certificate that lists the rabbi who married, there's nothing left. Okay.
it's honestly anything we would have had.
Mm.
It's a very long story, but anything we would have had would have been destroyed.
There's a lot of Jewish. Oh, another way would actually be if you can trace to somebody who's buried in a in an Orthodox Jewish synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at a cemetery. So, yeah, there are ways, and people who. So the question becomes like, why are you trying to prove it? But you could, you could actually claim Israeli citizenship, and the chief rabbinate would make that decision, and probably in your favor, and you could actually claim Israeli citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I struggled when Mike and I started dating because I am only a quarter Jewish at this point because my mom didn't marry someone who was just the bloodline, and so marrying Michael meant that my kids would only be an eighth, and I was really bothered by that. And then I decided I loved him too much, and it didn't matter. But I was really when I was younger, that really mattered to me.
As far as Jewish law is concerned, you are 100% Jewish, and your children are 100% Jewish.
But I'm getting that information from the birthright people, where I was like fighting my way to explain that I was really actually Jewish and that I qualified.
So, well, yeah, who was birthright through though? Which group were you doing birthright through? Because you have to choose an agency
I
with
can't remember.
which
Honestly,
birthright.
been so long.
And I'm guessing, my real guess is because, so there's a lot of internal politics.
Yeah.
Reform has started doing this patrilineal descent thing, and um, what people have started saying to them is, you're making everybody in the world Jewish, right? Because if you have one ancestor, and they're like, no, if you were raised Jewish and your father or mother, so they've Reform especially, and that they're the largest group, and conservative to some extent, have so moved on from Jewish law that they're not comfortable making the same assertions. And outside the United States, in Israel, the chief rabbinate is only Orthodox. Outside of the United States, basically only Orthodox Judaism exists. So I have to wonder, but like, I definitely encourage you to contact the local Chabad, because they would be ecstatic to have you. They would be absolutely ecstatic to have you and involved. And I would be ecstatic to learn for you to be involved. And I would love to hear that you're lighting Shabbat candles, because that would like make my whole life worthwhile.
As
You don't.
soon as my youngest doesn't decide that she's Evil Knievel, we will
Okay.
start lighting.
Age three is when little girls are encouraged, and like the local rabbi will get you a Shabbat lighting candle, a kit, and they would they would be very, very happy to have you guys over for Shabbat dinner. And you should go. I would I So for me, I don't know how much of my story Michael told you, but I was living an Orthodox life. And um, it just became very clear to me that that's not what God wanted for me. And so I gave up everything, and I was I was I was suicidal. I was like, I had no idea what I was going to do in life. Um, and I decided, I'm just going to live a secular life. And that's how I got involved in Jordan Peterson and stuff. And by this weird roundabout way, about 2 years ago, I got involved in the Bridges of Meaning server. And I had a little epiphany regarding Jesus, which I've talked to Michael about a little bit. And I found myself in a place where a lot of people who, like you, who are in fact Jewish, but would never have any connection to somebody with the Orthodox beliefs that I do and the background that I do. Um, like I, I've I have come into contact with so many people in that situation who are halakhically Jewish, but if I weren't where I am, they would have no connection with actual Orthodox Judaism. Because if I was living the life that I envisioned for myself, I wouldn't be talking to Michael. I would never be talking to Michael, and I certainly wouldn't end up talking to his wife. I would be taking care of my wife and kids in and very insular. Like, I would be learning Torah all day, and I would be living the Orthodox life, which I am not. And for me, it's just become like, okay, I feel like God's put me in a place where I can be a resource to people like you. So when I say, like, if you were to light Shabbat candles, it, because I would feel like everything I went through was worthwhile, so that you would have that connection.
Thank you for making yourself vulnerable.
So when am I going to let you guys go? Because I can tell you are very, very tired. What did you guys want to talk about? And what are we going to say after that moment?
Oh, something about the Trinity or John.
Paul of Tarsus, and how important it is not
Wait,
to.
so I would love to hear, Jacob, why Paul of Tarsus is kind of a rub to you. I'm interested.
Okay, so my epiphany about Jesus, when and this is another thing that when I start talking, I start crying. My epiphany about Jesus was, so what happened when I got on Bridges of Meaning was people started asking about things that were that I had never explored, because my idea had always been Christians know their Bible far better than I ever will. And if they tell me Jesus taught that he was God, then he must have taught that he's God, right? And that if they taught that Jesus taught whatever, that they must be correct, right? And so that had been my engagement, and I had always engaged with Christians with the idea, look, if you can convince me that Jesus was the Messiah, I would be ecstatic. I am looking forward to the Messiah. If it's Jesus, I want to know. But I had never I had never engaged directly with the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
I had always engaged through knowledgeable Christians because I
Yep.
figured me picking it up is never going to be like actually engaging with somebody who actually had this is their life. And I believe that is actually true with Orthodox Judaism. Like,
Well, that's what I was going to say. That sounds very much like what I've experienced in the Jewish faith, and people feeling like you experienced Judaism through the community, and what you know of God is very likely because of what you've seen from your parents and your rabbi and your community leaders.
it's a huge part of it. And yes, I mean, obviously studying scripture is incredibly important. Anybody who pays any attention to me knows how much I love scripture. But so that was my engagement with Christianity, and that was my engagement with Jesus. And so what happened on Bridges of Meaning is people would ask me about the Jewish context of the things that Jesus said. And I started actually paying attention and reading on the inside, trying to understand what Jesus was saying
Mm-hmm.
without listening to what Christians would tell me Jesus was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered a Jesus who's Jewish, like not just born Jewish, but like Jewish. And to the point where there was this thing, I was trying to understand communion and like how they had gone from kiddush to communion. Like, how did this happen, and what was Jesus teaching? And all of the descriptions in the Gospels are talk about Jesus says, "This is my blood. This is my blood poured out."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And generally, we think poured out as in poured into a cup to drink, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking, hold on, poured out. What's he saying? And it triggered something which is a very esoteric part of Judaism that very few people know about. It's not something like it's something far beyond what vast majority of people have ever heard of, which is this concept of Mashiach ben Yosef, and it's a whole thing which and the Seder, and um, I saw a Jewish Jesus, and I talked to Paul Vanderplay, and he's like, yeah, no, it's poured out as in like spilled on the floor. And I cried for like 2 hours, because I felt like Jesus was the most betrayed person in history, betrayed by Judaism, but betrayed even more by Christians. Because, and I realize this is really offensive, but it's what I believe. Vast majority of Christians have no capacity to understand what Jesus was saying because they don't have the Jewish background to understand what Jesus was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm concerned, from everything I've seen, Jesus was teaching Judaism. And Paul is the person who hijacked Christianity away from Jesus' teachings and Judaism. And that's why I call him Ball of Tarsus. Like, he took what I feel is the perfectly Jewish teachings of Jesus and completely perverted them.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't think that he expounded upon them and enlightened them to enable them to be digestible? I mean, I could see how it would be offensive. I'm not assuming that this is what you think, but like based on what you were saying about an Orthodox person not welcoming someone who was a Gentile into their fellowship.
Mm.
And so I could see how Paul trying to enable, like saying, I think that the gospel is also for the Gentile as well as the Jew, could be offensive.
this is the thing. I do believe that Christianity is Judaism viewed through a glass darkly. Um, I I don't think vast majority of Christians are willing to accept the idea that um, there is a priesthood of Israel in the world as the firstborn. And people chafe at that. And my first question to them is, well, don't you believe that, first to the Jew, then the Gentile? Don't you believe that Jesus was like the firstborn of like the new Adam and stuff like that? So why are you chafing at the idea that, and it's funny, but there are Christians who are coming to this idea, which is a Jewish idea, which a lot of people have a hard time swallowing. We have a caste system in Judaism,
Mm-hmm.
and I am unapologetic about that because it's what the Torah teaches. And so there is Kohen, Levi, Israel, Gentile, and that doesn't mean that I, as Israel, am not loved by God. God, I believe God loves me, but I believe that I have a different position than the Kohanim, than the Levites, and I believe Gentiles do have a different position. And yeah, I mean, Christianity has been, there's no Jew or Gentile, there's no man or woman, there's no slave or free in Christ Jesus. And to some extent, I can agree with that. But again, I think that the craziness of the world points to those things which are most wrong. And what is the craziest thing in going on in our society right now? The idea that there's no man or woman in Christ Jesus, right? So I view it exactly the same. The idea that there's no Jew or Greek in Christ Jesus, I think there's a reason why that's all together, because I do believe God created Christianity in order, like Maimonides said almost 1,000 years ago, in order for Jewish ideas to spread throughout the world so that people could recognize them when the actual Messiah, and I don't believe Jesus. I have weird beliefs about Jesus. I certainly don't believe he's the Messiah, as in the Davidic Messiah. And I do believe the Davidic Messiah is going to come, and I do believe we're like miraculous things are happening, but those miraculous things include the fact that 50 years ago, 60 years ago, there were 0 Noahides in the world. Today, as best we know, there's about 100,000 people who consider themselves Noahides, including Antonio, who, is it's quite all right. I will let you go, but including Antonio, it's amazing to me that I know a Gentile who he's like, yeah, I believe Judaism is true, and I'm a Gentile, and like, it's knowing Antonio has been one of the craziest things in my life. But over the past 2 years, so many things have been crazy in my life because, it like, I do feel like we're seeing miraculous things, and that miraculous thing for me includes what I see is an unfolding of Christianity into full view so that people can see the full light of the Torah and no longer look at through the glass darkly that I believe Christianity is. And I realize like this is a very different view of the world than Christians have. But I want you to see the fullness of the light in the same way that Christians often would say to me they want me to see the fullness of the light.
What were you going to say?
Well, I mean, I'm opposed to I'm very against any like restriction of information or knowledge or anything like that. And I would say that I think, historically, when like Christians have, if they had said like, don't study too much about Judaism or any of this stuff, like, because like I hate it. I hate it when Christians say that about anything, like,
Just be
because
dumb. Just believe it.
no, I
Just
mean,
because.
it's okay. It's okay. Like, if a pastor is being knowing like where a person's at and saying like, listen, you've been a Christian for 2 weeks. Don't start reading this crazy thing or whatever. Like, that's good advice, to give to an individual. But the categorical, like, the which it's not just every sect has this impulse to say like, this is our space and don't go beyond it and don't read those books. And I think that that's a big mistake, and I think that just let everybody read everything they want and come to their own conclusions. And I'm not worried about it, because I think when you try to hide anything from anybody and then they find out about it, then it ruins your credibility. And so
And if you believe that God is the God of truth,
yeah.
you should not be scared of truth. And I believe God is the God of truth. If Jesus is the Messiah, I want to know, and I've always wanted to know. And it's, for me, the only way to know that was through engaging religious Christians. And what was shocking to me was like to encounter a Jewish Jesus. And there's a Rabbi Lichtenstein who I had a lot of disagreements with. He lived like 100 years ago in Europe, and he never actually got baptized, but he was he said, one of the things he said which really stuck with me is, I looked into the Gospels expecting thorns, and I got a bouquet of roses. And he's not the only person to say that. There was another rabbi who wrote a whole thing. There's been a few. And it's like, the Jesus that I've seen, and I'm actually working on writing a book about this, the Jesus that I've seen is 100% Jewish.
Oh yeah, and he never claims to be anything other than that. I think the sticking point for me in someone saying, I believe he's Jewish, but I don't believe he's the Messiah, he always claims that he's going to come back. And so,
well, all of us are, everybody's going to come back. We believe in the resurrection of the dead.
Well, but he says he's going to be the one to usher in the new heaven and the new earth, and that he's going to usher in the new age. And so if he is doing that, then that means that claim makes him audaciously a liar or a lunatic. Or
no, I don't think so.
The Lord.
No, because there's the four craftsmen. There are the four craftsmen. No, craftsmen.
Mm-hmm.
This is from I believe it's either Ezekiel or Zechariah, for the four craftsmen, which is Elijah, the priestly Messiah, the Davidic Messiah, and the Josephite Messiah. And I believe Jesus, and I have weird beliefs about Jesus, was the Josephite Messiah, not the Davidic Messiah.
But why does anyone need more than one Messiah? Because the definition of Messiah is the one who comes to save. But it's one to save.
No. Messiah just means, so the Bible refers to Cyrus as the Messiah of God. The only person that the Bible actually, the only time it actually says Mashiach, the only time it actually says the word Messiah is when Isaiah is calling Cyrus the Messiah. And the idea of Mashiach, of being anointed, there's all kinds of anointings all through the Bible. The king is anointed, the tabernacle is anointed, and there are the four craftsmen. Let me look up four craftsmen, because so the four craftsmen is in Zechariah 1:21.
Okay.
And so I believe those are 4 different people. And that's because from a Jewish standpoint, when people say, like when Christians say Jesus is the Messiah, it's like there's a complete disconnect there, because that to me says the Messiah has come, we are living in the Messianic era, and Jesus is the Messiah. Whereas if you're saying what Christians mean to a Jewish audience, you would say, I believe Jesus will be the Messiah, right? Because Christians don't believe that Jesus has fulfilled the prophecies of the Messiah. But most Christians don't even know that.
You know
And
scripture better than a lot of Christians.
that, so it's an audacious thing to say, but yeah, I do. And I understand the scriptures in ways that I don't think somebody who I don't think you can understand without the background that I have in studying Talmud and studying, and it's like I, I just don't think the vast majority of Christians have any capacity to understand what Jesus was saying, which is an audacious thing for somebody like me to say.
Okay, we have to go to bed.
Okay.
All
And
right.
anytime you want back, and please do consider lighting Shabbat candles, Mandie.
It's very nice to meet you, Jacob. He speaks very highly of you a lot.
I'm glad. I'll talk to you guys later.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.